Welcome to Phantasm Paranormal. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about an investigation we did in Prague, Nebraska, quite a few years ago. It was quite strange, to say the least. A woman contacted me and asked me if we would investigate their house. And she told me they were getting ready to move out, not in. I thought that was a bit strange, but I told her I would. I met with her and her husband at a Kwik Shop in town. And we sat down, I had a soda, and I listened to her and her husband tell their stories about some of the things that they witnessed inside the house. The stories they told me were out of this world, to say the least. First off, they only lived in the house for a month, and now they were moving out. The very same day they moved in, she took a picture of her 6-year-old daughter standing on the front porch in front of the door going in. The woman said this was the first house we ever lived in, and my daughter wanted a picture for her grandma. She reached into an envelope. She pulled out a picture of her daughter on the front porch, and behind her, on the other side of the storm door, was an elderly man looking out at her. The man appeared to be translucent, and his face was distorted. He was also dressed in an old-style suit and had an old-style hat on. They called it derby. She told me about some children that they would hear screaming and crying sometimes during the day upstairs in the bedrooms. She found a little boy one time curled up in a corner in the fruit cellar underneath the house crying, and when she spoke to him, he looked up at her and vanished into thin air. And quite often, they would hear a woman screaming and crying at night between midnight and 1 a.m. in the morning, at least 2 to 3 times a week. She also told us about doors that would slam shut. They would hear heavy footsteps in the hallway upstairs. Dishes would fly off the table, and their 2-year-old dog died for no apparent reason just days after they moved into the house. Her entire family slept in her room every night because they were afraid. She also mentioned she would find bruises on her children's arms and backs. Her husband said, "We are moving out because of what's going on. We're going to be staying at my brother's house in Oakland until we find a new place. We just want you to check it out and see what you think." We started our investigation the very next night around 10 p.m. on a Friday night. The husband unlocked the door, but he and his wife refused to go in. Instead, they waited out in the driveway by their car. I'm going to show you some pictures of the house during the investigation. This is what the house looked like. That's the door where the picture was taken of the little girl on the porch and the translucent man behind him. When we got into the house, we were in the kitchen, and we all heard a woman's voice. And I turned around and I took a picture out into the living room where the voice came from. And we got an orb in the picture. Later on, we went upstairs, and we were all walking down the hallway, and we got an EVP of a little boy. I'll play that for you a little bit later. But the man you see in the doorway, his name is Rod. Okay. His wife's name's Pam, and they were good friends of ours. And Rod, he claimed to be psychic, and I had quite a bit of doubt in that because I'm not much of a believer in psychics. But he started telling us all kinds of things about the house, about children up there. And there were quite a few kids. He said there were 5 kids up there. And you can see the orbs around him. When we were going by this bedroom, we heard a noise inside it. So I took a picture before we went in, and there's 2 orbs in the picture. But while we were walking around the house, Rod was telling us stories about these children that were beaten by their father. And there was a woman that was always beat by her husband. And he said he was a drunk and miserable and, a piece of garbage. After we got done with the house, we went outside and started walking around. Rod's standing over by the barn there, and he said that, there's a lot more spirits here than we think. And there's quite a few orbs there, but I believe some of it is dust. There's one orb that's up over the side of that opening in the top of the barn. And you can see it up there. You can't miss it. It's a monster. There's another one that's inside the barn. We went in there, and Rod stood there for a while, and he said a woman committed suicide in here. He said she hung herself up in the upstairs of the barn. There's another orb there. There's quite a few orbs in here. I'll circle them for you. But while we were walking around, Rod told me that the woman that was inside the house, she was murdered, and she was buried outside over here in the trees. But he said that there's more graves on the property. And, well, let me tell you some more about this woman. I guess the woman, the husband came home one night drunk and in a rage, and he beat her to death. And he took her body outside and buried her underneath a wood pile out in the yard. But Rod went on to say that there's other graves on the property. We walked over to another group of trees towards the front of the house, and he said there's quite a few people buried here. And I thought, well, there's no markers. And he says, no, they're telling me that the markers are down in the ditch. And he said, follow me. And he started walking through the field down into the ditch. And, yeah, there were some grave markers down there. And some of them were busted up. We just left them there. But we went back upstairs to the barn, or back upstairs. We went back up to the barn and went upstairs. And he showed us where this woman hung herself. And she wasn't very old either. Now, we concluded our investigation that night, and Leslie, my wife, and I, we were talking about it. And, like I was saying, oh, yeah, he was just blowing it out his ears, Rod, he just making that stuff up, and da-da-da-da-da. And she convinced me to go out and drive around the area, see if we could find anybody that would talk to us. We asked several of the neighbors that lived in the area if they would talk to us, and all of them refused. Some of them were really rude to us. We finally found a woman by the name of Catherine that said that she would talk to us. She lived over a mile away from the house. But Catherine, she was around 80 years old. I asked her about the house. She told me it was built back in 1937, when she was about 16 years old. She also said she knew the people that lived in the house. She said she would babysit for them every Friday night while the couple would go to a dance, the dance hall in town. I then asked her what they were like. What were the people like? She said the lady, Rebecca, was a very nice lady and a great mom to her 5 kids. That drew my attention real quick. Rod said there were 5 kids in the house. 3 girls, 2 boys, but her husband Harold was, and I quote, a drunken asshole. Pardon my French. I asked her what she meant by that, why she would say he was a drunken asshole. She said Harold was a drunk and really abusive to Rebecca and the kids. He would go out almost every night to the saloon in town and get drunk, and then when he got home, he would beat his wife and kids. That would explain the screaming woman and the crying kids and screaming kids in the house, because Rod said that, or the woman said that every night around midnight to 1 a.m., they would hear a woman screaming and crying. She recalled a few times when they came home from the dance in town, and her husband would start beating on Rebecca as soon as they got in the door. Catherine said, I remember going over there a few times with my mom, and Rebecca would have a split lip, bruises all over her arms, and one time she had a black eye. The kids would always have welts on their backs from being whipped with a belt by the dad, bruises on their arms and on their legs. Sometimes he would lock the kids in the fruit cellar for days as punishment for stupid things. The children hated their dad. She said those 5 kids had no one to protect them but their mom. I don't know if you know about the Department of Health and Human Services, but that place wasn't founded until April 11th, 1953, and Child Protective Services wasn't established until around 1974, when the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which mandated that all states establish procedures to investigate suspected incidences of child abuse. Okay? So Rebecca, she didn't have nobody to turn to. When I asked her what happened to the family, she told me that Rebecca finally got tired of the abuse and left him one night during a bad thunderstorm. Rod told us that she was murdered during a bad thunderstorm, and she was buried on the property. She said she was about 18 when Rebecca left, and she found it very strange that she would leave at night during a bad thunderstorm with nowhere to go and no way to get there. She said she loved those kids, and she wouldn't leave anywhere without those kids. Leslie asked her what happened to the family. Catherine said the dad died one summer night in a car accident when he was drunk. She thinks he was about 50 to 55 years old at the time. The kids all stayed in the house. None of them ever got married. and they all died in the house. Some of them turned out to be drunks like their dad. The youngest boy, Robbie, died at home when he was about 7. That'll explain the little boy down in the cellar that was crying when the homeowner saw him down there. 2 of them committed suicide when they were in their early 30s. One of the girls hung herself in the barn. Boom. Rod said that a woman hung herself in the barn. Another one overdosed of sleeping pills and killed herself. The other boy drank himself to death when he was in his 40s. And the last one died just a few years ago of a heart problem. And they died in the house as well. The house was then sold at auction in 1998 or 1999 to some guy from Lincoln. He rents it out. He must be a lousy landlord, she said, because people that move in move out just as fast. You know, she said that they'll move in one day and not much longer they'll be moving out again. I was blown away by all the comments that she made because they matched up with what Rod was telling us. So, I'm going to play for you the EVP of a little boy that we got upstairs when we walked past one of the bedrooms. Now, when the little boy said, "Look at the girl missed again," or something like that, there was a man's voice at the very end of it. We weren't able to pull that out very well, but it sounded like he said yes. But anyway, we left that house, and we've been checking on it over the years. And, yeah, that place, people don't stay there. They're there for a month or two, and they move out again. We haven't been back there in a couple years, and I'll probably take a drive out there sometime this month and see if anybody lives out there. But that's what the Prague investigation was about. And I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But I'm going to get out of here. Y'all have a nice night.
Bye, everybody.